Hello, how you guys doing? Hope you're doing well out there. James here. I'm going to, I want to dedicate this video to the veterans, all veterans, um, regardless of what part of the world, whether they white, black, white, Native American, Hispanic, whatever. But I particularly want to dedicate this to the veterans of men and women, black men and women from past tense that never really got the recognition. I'm going to show you some pictures and I'm going to play a video background of a person. His channel was Runaway Slave, and I'm going to show you the pictures and let you see the background. And, and the reason why, because I want to dedicate this to the people in my family that's been veterans. My uncle who was in the Army, my dad served in the Navy, one of my good friends, one of my best friends, he served in the Air Force and Army. Then I have a cousin that served in the Navy, and I had a cousins that served the Navy other branches. But I want to dedicate this to the black military veterans from World War One and World War Two, because we seen some of their stories, about the Tuskegee Airmen and things like that. But there's more to this story that America just gives you a little briefing about. So this is dedicated to the black veterans. Shout out to all the black veterans who served. But as I'm playing these pictures, I'm going to show you. I'm going to let his voice do the background, because he did this in honor of his uncle, I think his grand uncle. So I'm going to play the background, and I won't be talking too much, but showing you pictures of these great men and women that served our country. And the reason why I did that is because they don't get the recognition. They went through a hard time, and they put their life on the line just to come back and get lynched and come back to get discriminated, segregated, and go through trauma once in war, but go through a trauma in America, being they wasn't really respected like they should. So this in honor of the black veterans, and with his voice doing the background. Hopefully you can be able to hear it.
If you could earn a doctor's salary,
I'm going to show you his uncle's picture once, but I'm going to let his...
Would you do it? Hi, I'm attorney Bob Diamond, and my students and I earn more than most busy professionals by delivering
Shout out to Runaway
checks to
Slave
former
channel.
property owners. I know it might sound weird, but it's real, 100% legal, and easy to do. If you want to learn how, you can do the same.
Assalamu alaikum. Okay, so what I had to do for this channel is create an email list. The reason why is because due to the nature of the content of this channel, I don't know when the content is going to just mysteriously disappear or this channel will be shut down. The email list is just for the followers or the subs so that you know where these things are just in case this mysteriously happens. So just go down to the link in the description of the video, click join email list, put your email address in there, and boom, you're good to go. That means that I can also send you other information that I cannot post here on YouTube, and you'll also know where the channel is and where the content is in the event that it does disappear. Okay, let's cook. Okay, so in a recent video that I created, which I believe was about Walter Springs going off to war, leaving college and going off to war, if you haven't seen it yet, go check it out. A loyal sub who leaves great comments, informative comments all the time on this channel by the name of Still Rain, I believe it's Still Rain, brought up an interesting comment or a reference to the war, and I had replied that my great uncle, who's my mother's uncle, he also was went off to World War II, and he was one of the people who actually lost his life in Port Chicago in California in 1944 in an explosion, one of the many black naval soldiers who lost their life there. So I was going to get into that, and I had to make a video about that because he is my great uncle, my mother's uncle, my grandmother's brother, younger brother. His name is Floyd McKinley Davis. This is him right here. here in the picture. Okay, so let me explain this explosion. Let me explain this explosion that happened in the year of 1944 at Port Chicago in California that some suspect was a nuclear bomb experiment. You know, who knows? But him, my uncle, being my mother's uncle, Floyd McKinley Davis, and many other young black men in the military who went off to World War II, lost their lives. Probably some of your relatives as well were involved in this explosion, okay? Get in the comments if so. Now, as we discussed on this channel numerous times about why so many of our people join the military, you know, we are not patriots, but we do join the military for specific reasons, and it's usually only about survival, you know. But at this time, many African Americans were eager to serve in the U.S. military during World War II because they wanted to prove a point. They wanted to prove that black people were worthy and wanted to fight for America. And the goal was that if they went off to war and they served these white supremacists in the government, they would eventually have a change of heart about how they feel about black people, and things would get better for them and better for you and better for us in the future. So this is why a lot of these black men went off to World War II, okay? Now, when these men did go off to war, they went to battle foreign enemies, but you gotta remember, they also had to battle and fight against the enemy, who is the white community, the racist white American community at that time, in the military as well. So they were already battling or dealing with, you know, the white community before the military. They go in the military to try to prove a point. They're supposed to fight side by side with these same people who hate them, you know, which is just straight, just to think about that, the confusion and how crazy it is. Not saying they were crazy, because I get it at the time what their goal was. But just to have to go through that, you know, when these black men did go off to these wars, to World War II, with hopes that they could change the hearts of white Americans, they realized that it was to no avail eventually. They came home and they got right back on track to being treated like an N-word again. Then going to the military did absolutely nothing to change the conditions for black people, because this was all based off of hatred from the white community. Did nothing. Whatever, N-word. Okay, you went to war, now you back. Now I want to take you out even more because I'm worried and scared about you. And you also, now you done got this weapons training, you did this and that, so I'm kind of concerned you might be a little too uppity. Let me get you up out here. This is what they were doing to black men when they came home from war. So my mom's uncle, who was my grandma's younger brother, Floyd McKinley Davis, he was one of these black men who joined as well. He was one of these black men who joined for this reason. Now, he was stationed at the U.S. Navy Ammunition Depot in Port Chicago, on Suisun Bay, which is about 36 miles from San Francisco, okay? So even though it's called Port Chicago, I don't want you to get it mixed up, it is in California. So at this location, many of the black seamen, they worked shifts around the clock, and all they did was load ships with bombs and shells that were going to be headed out to war. That's all they did. That's all these black men did, was load ships, bombs, shells, all day, around the clock, 24/7. So they would take these bombs and they would put them on the they would transfer them to the railroad boxcars on the to the ships, and that's all they did around the clock. Hardcore, back-breaking work. Back-breaking work. In addition, you have to remember this is very dangerous work. But the U.S. military told these men, and they told people that it was all safe, it was all good, nothing to worry about. And you have to know that at this time, they felt like black men did not have the intelligence or the competence to do anything else but back-breaking jobs like this in the military. So when these men did these jobs, they worked under the supervision of their white bosses, or the white officers in the military. Typical white American, nasty, racist, knuckle-dragging beasts. They expected nothing else from these black sailors but to do this back-breaking work around the clock. They would also have have fun when they supervised these young black men by making things a competition. So they would have different divisions of these, groups of black sailors work against other ones. Basically, okay, this is my team, this is my team. Let's see who gets the most done. And the winners, whatever team won, they would reward these black sailors or these black seamen with access to recreational privileges, radios, or black newspapers. They would give them access to be able to read black newspapers and things like that they figured these men would like, to entice them to work faster, all so that they can look good and say, hey, look, my crew, we loaded this amount of bombs or ammunition today. I look great. That's what they did. But it was a problem with this, because the faster that these men worked, and the more that they were forced to work in these conditions by these white supervisors, the more dangerous it became. It was very dangerous. So a problem was that these black sailors at Port Chicago, they were never given any type of training. They didn't get any training. They're operating tons of high explosives. No training. So, you know how our people are. We kind of genius when it comes to things like this. We could look at stuff and pick up on it fast, So these young sailors, that they learned how to operate these machines like winches and things like that move thousands of pounds of bombs just from observation. No training at all. It's like, get in there and do this. Super dangerous job. Very dangerous work atmosphere. And to add the pressure of these white officers pushing them and pressuring them to move even faster and work harder so that they can look good to their superiors. So this work was horrible. It was dangerous. It was backbreaking. It was straight slave labor. And the black sailors had actually voiced their safety concerns numerous times about this a year prior. Numerous times. Okay? Now, this is an explosion that happened. We're going to get into that. But a year before this explosion, a group of the sailors, they had written to local attorneys, warning them that morale had dropped to an alarming depth. People don't want to be there. The men want to go home. They asked for help, because it was just horrible work conditions. They even wrote in the letter, it says, "We, the Negro sailors of the Naval Enlisted Barracks of Port Chicago, California, are waiting for a new deal." Then they also wrote, "Will we wait in vain?" So just imagine working at these places. The black sailors, they described this place as a chain gang or a mule team or a slave outfit, and they knew that they were being mistreated and just worked like, machines. Horrible. And you got to understand, people, this is World War II. These men back then, they was built different than us. A lot of them came from like hardcore laboring. A lot of them, their parents or their grandparents or even them, they came from the death fields in the South, and they're used to hard labor, hard work, nothing else. No sit down and technology. We talking hard back-breaking work. There were no strangers to labor, a lot of these young black men. So you could imagine that even if they're complaining and they're writing letters and seeking help, you can imagine how hard this work was. But here's what happened. Here's a change in the story. On July 17th, 1944, at around 10 p.m., all of this abuse, unsafe work conditions proved to be deadly. There was a big blast with a force, they say, of about 5 kilotons of TNT. Blast with a force of 5 kilotons of TNT at Port Chicago. I don't even know what the force of 5 kilotons of TNT can do, or even one. But if anybody knows, get in the comments, let us know how much force that is. But it's something drastic from what I understand. This blast was so major that everybody thought it was an attack, that it was another attack like Pearl Harbor. The black soldiers, they're running wild, they're hollering, they're looking for help, they're trying to see what's going on. Finally, they said that these men got their emergency light together, some of them, and they said that some guys came by in a truck. They went down to the dock to see what's going on. When they get there, problem, there's no dock, there's no ship. This explosion just blew everything away. There were sailors that were even sleeping in barracks a mile and a half from this port, and they thought they were under attack by the Japanese. That's how serious this explosion was. They felt it that far away, a mile and a half. People who lived in this area, in the Bay Area, they woke up thinking that it was an earthquake. So this one ship, it's called the Quinault Victory. This was lifted out of the water. Just imagine a ship being blown up out of the water, spinning around and shattered into pieces. That's how serious this explosion was. You know how big these ships are. It flew up out of the water, spun around, and blew into pieces. They said only tiny fragments of another ship called the E.A. Bryan were ever recovered. This is how serious this explosion was. So all the people on the pier aboard the two naval ships and on a nearby Coast Guard fire, on a fire barge, they were all killed instantly. All of them killed instantly. 321 people died. 202 of them being black enlisted sailors. Only 51 bodies were recovered. So one of these men was my mom's uncle, Floyd McKinley Davis, my grandmother's younger brother. This event was the worst home front disaster of the war, point blank period. 202 men, black men, gone, and only 51 of their bodies were recovered. So this is how powerful this explosive was. Some of the devastation from reports from men who actually survived said that when they came back, you would look and you would see a shoe with a foot in it with like a half leg just floating in the water. Just floating. They said you would see like a head just floating across the water. An arm floating across the water. This was a horrible event. So just imagine. You get up to see what happened, and the next day you see your friend's head float. Look at your friend. You see your friend's head floating across the water. That's crazy. And understand that these were young men as well. They were all under 23. They were all under 23, young. You see your friend's arm, leg. I don't know, you probably don't even know it's your friend, but just imagine seeing the head just floating across the water. You can't do, you just looking. Okay, so after a horrible event like this, of course, the Navy has to do their investigation. Okay, so
I'm pretty passionate about what we do and about the fact that we're able to restore the body's normal function without the use of opiates or any other.
Okay, so
Hold on. Sorry about that. Phone went out on me. But I just want to dedicate this channel to the black veterans from World War I and World War II. And even black veterans all the way up until the 60s, 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and 2000. Because this is the they are the backbone of, they're one of the greatest backbone of history. And they've done so many great things that, they never get credit for. And I just think that they deserve to get their credit. There's more to their story than what Hollywood gives you. And they did great things. And they went through horrible discrimination. Even been told lies to other people. Did you know I used to hear stories about when they would all go over as a military and the German women would find them attractive? Some of the white men would tell the German women that these black men had tails. And any black men know what I'm talking about if they ever hear the story. So you got dehumanized even in the service. But they don't want to talk about that part, humiliate, them. These men did things and strong. You know, my grandfather was in the service. My uncles, and I dedicate this video to them. That's what I'm dedicating this video to. So this one's gonna be about.
Assalamu alaikum. Okay, so what I had to do for this channel is create an email list. The reason why is because due to the nature of the content of this channel, I don't know when the content is going to just mysteriously disappear or this channel will be shut down. The email list is just for the followers or the subs so that you know where these things are just in case this mysteriously happens. So just go down to the link in the description of the video, click join email list, put your email address in there, and boom, you're good to go. That means that I can also send you other information that I cannot post here on YouTube, and you'll also know where the channel is and where the content is in the event that it does disappear. Okay, let's go. Okay, so what a lot of people don't know is that during World War II, women served in the military as well. Now, the reason why women served in the military is because the military felt that they could train and use women in certain non-combat positions so that it would free up more manpower so that the men could go into combat and the women can do these jobs that, you know, they feel as though a woman is capable of doing. And that way they would have more men out in the field, you know, getting busy in the war aspect or whatever. So this is why there were actually women who served in World War II. Now what they did was they formed a new branch in the military for women during World War II called the Women's Army Corps, or the WAC, or they were called WACs, Women's Army Corps. Okay. Now the goal was to have the goal was to train these women, have them working, you know, in certain jobs such as, you know, clerical workers, medical technicians, drivers, and even aircraft mechanics, nursing, and things like that. These women were going to do jobs that men sometimes did to free up manpower. Okay. Now, that's why they formed this Women Army Corps, or WAC, WAC. Now, in order to recruit for this new Women's Army Corps, or WAC, the government advertised aggressively in the newspapers. They were in the radio. They put out pamphlets, billboards, all kind of things like that. And these new military positions, they did appeal to many young women in America. And quite naturally, it appealed to many black or African American young women as well. Okay, so as a result of this recruitment campaign, right, more than 6,500 black women volunteered to join the military during World War II and become a WAC. They're called WACs. I'm going to just continue to call them WACs. Okay, so they have 6,500 black women who signed up for this new military division. Out of this 6,500, 855 of these black women were sent overseas to do clerical mail work. Now they have kind of a popular story as well. They worked in a unit called the 6888, the 6888, and it was a postal battalion, and they were the only black women's army corps that were deployed overseas during World War II. Okay, so these black women in the 6888, they had a very hard task of tackling the mail backlog and things like that during the final months of World War II. So they had a very, very hard job to do. Even though you may think it's only mail, the mail was the only connection that these soldiers had with the outside world. And just imagine just piles and piles and piles of mail, and these women are in another country, and their job was to get that straight. And these women, they were the only black Army Corps deployed overseas during World War II. They were called the 6888. Interesting story about them. On February 8th of 2022, the U.S. House of Representatives voted 422-0 to award a Congressional Gold Medal to these black women from the 6888 of the Central Postal Directory Battalion. So these are the black women who served in World War II overseas. So they were overseas, these black women from the year of 1942 to 1945. 1942 to 1945, 855 black women, hard task, and they're just getting recognized or recognition in 2022. How disrespectful and disgusting. What a slap in the face to our people. But anyway, that's just part of the story. That right there in itself is a whole nother story. This is a fraction of this group. Remember, I said there were 6,500 women who signed up. Okay? And out of that 6,500, only 855 were deployed overseas to work with this group called the 6888. Where were the rest of them? Let's cook on that. Okay? So the rest of these black women, they stayed in the United States. Now remember, they
I hate these commercials.
This is what I pay each month for my car insurance, and this is the full coverage that it comes with. You could get this price too. All you have to do is click the link I've left below, answer a few questions about your car, and you'll instantly find the best rates.
volunteered for the military, they signed up, they responded to advertisements for good things like medical training, nurse training, technical training. Remember, they volunteered for the military, they signed up, they responded to advertisements for good things like medical training, nurse training, technical training, drivers, mechanics. You know, these advertisements even said no training needed. They're going to show you how to do these things. People who were already in these fields, black women who were already in these fields, some of them, they even joined because it would only be good, right? It would only be good for their career, their resume, the future, learning things. And in addition, they get to show that they are black people who are worthy by, volunteering for World War II, just as the men did. So, of course, these positions were very enticing to many black women, okay? Now, again, many of the black women who took these positions already had jobs in that profession, So this is an opportunity, This is an opportunity to get some more training. Some of them didn't have jobs in the profession. If they didn't, this is where I can get the training at right here. I can become a nurse. I can become a medical technician. I can do all kinds of other things. This is what's being advertised, okay? So, the black women who did volunteer for these jobs or for the WAC, the military for World War II, when they joined, they were assigned to bases from Iowa all the way to Massachusetts, various bases, okay? These women were put in different bases and assigned. They're going to be getting their training. They're going to be getting their work, new career, new thing. They're excited about this. Now, when the black women got to these places, instead of training in jobs in nursing and medical technical roles and things like that, these black women were forced to clean garbage cans, scrub floors, and cook. That's it. It's just that stupid. The lie is just that stupid. You hear what they were what they were told. I told you what they were told they were going to do, where they're going to work as, what they're going to train in. But when they got to these bases, all they did was clean garbage cans, scrub floors, and cook. I'm talking back-breaking, slave-type work as well, around the clock. This is all they did. They were lied to. They were sent to these bases and forced to work like big plantation house slaves. This is the U.S. government, the white community lying again as usual, not keeping their word. Now, all the white WACs or the white women who joined the military at this time, they received more desirable positions like surgical and medical technician, all kinds of other stuff. Basically, the positions that these black women signed up for are what the white women were doing. These women didn't sign up to clean out no garbage cans and do sweep floors and all that other nonsense. They didn't sign up for that. They signed up to get some real training, okay? So there was a military hospital at a place called Fort Devens or Fort Devens. And there's a group of black women who worked at this. This fort is located in Massachusetts, okay? And there's a group of black women that worked at this, and they were headed at this base, and they were headed by a commanding officer who was a racist white pig by the name of Colonel Walter Crandall, okay? Now, it was reported that Colonel Walter Crandall said that he did not want colored women as medical technicians. He also said that black women under his command were sent there to scrub and wash floors, wash dishes, and do all the dirty work. These were his exact words that came out of his mouth, okay? The abuse that some of these black women on these bases put up with got so bad that some of these women actually attempted suicide right here in America. Patriots, right? In the military. Some of these women attempted suicide. And when these black women complained or voiced their opinions about what they were doing, the military said, this is not about racism, it's about what you ladies do best. So these black women are out here, they're living their life, they're working at one point, wherever they're at in their hometown, they're young, they're ambitious, they were presented what they thought was an opportunity, and now they pretty much live on a concentration camp or a work camp, prison style type stuff, working like slaves. Imagine that. You know, some of them left their jobs for this. You know, but here's the kicker. You know, black people back then, the way black people were back then, they can only take but so much. They can only take but so much. So this group of women on this base, Fort Devens or Fort Devens, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, they said later for this, we're getting tired of it. So on March 9th, 1945, 54 of the 100 black women stationed at this base refused to show up for work. 54 of them said, no, we ain't doing it. This is March 9th, 1945. Now remember, these women, these black women, are at various bases throughout the United States being treated like this. I'm just speaking of this one right here. And there's a group of black women that worked at this, and they were headed at this base, and they were headed by a commanding officer who was a racist white pig by the name of Colonel Walter Crandall, okay? Now, it was reported that Colonel Walter Crandall said that he did not want colored women as medical technicians. He also said that black women under his command were sent there to scrub and wash floors, wash dishes, and do all the dirty work. These were his exact words that came out of his mouth, okay? The abuse that...
Sorry about that. Phone keep going out. But yeah, this is their story. Shout out to the black women that would have been like my grandmother's age when they were young. Shout out to them. And for serving at that time. And these women, they never really got the recognitions that they did. Probably the white women did, but not the black women. There's the white female army. White female army. I don't know, like they was trying to mix in Army Corps back then. But you get the idea. And I want to, send a shout out to them, man. To the men and women that, because black women went through some stuff too in the service, and probably still going through some things in the military. Who knows? So I just want to send my shout out to them. Sorry for that. It went out. Also, I didn't know this. Black British soldiers. Shout out to them. There were black British soldiers. And this is on this website. But so to my black British, shout out to you. Let's get the video going.
was the 1st Battalion of the British West Indies Regiment. These men would soon mount a very successful attack on Turkish lines in Palestine in 1918. Along with the 2nd Battalion, they would advance across 5 kilometres of open land under heavy fire and take their objectives with minimal losses. Thanks in no small part to attacks like these, the Ottomans would surrender the following month. But despite their service, stories like these featuring black British soldiers in the First World War were largely forgotten. These photographs show the victory parades in London on July 19th, 1919, the centrepiece of the celebrations marking the end of the First World War. Thousands of soldiers marched past the newly created cenotaph to pay their respects to their fallen comrades. British, French, American, Belgian and Greek troops are all present, as well as men from the British Empire. But what is most striking is who is missing. No black units were invited to take part from the West Indies or from Africa. It was less than a year since the war had ended, and already black soldiers were being deliberately forgotten. So today we're going to take an in-depth look at black soldiers who served for Britain during the First World War, from the West Indies, Africa and the UK. Who they were, what they did, and why they've been forgotten.
And the view of the First World War we normally have is very Eurocentric. Especially for Britain, it's primarily the Western Front where the bulk of the British Army fought the Germans from 14 to 18. And this has really neglected other stories from the wider world and the wider history of the war. And quite often it's the non-white stories that have actually been neglected, mainly because, in a way, they weren't seen as central to the narrative.
When the First World War broke out in 1914, the British Empire was one of the world's great powers. A quarter of the world was under its control. To win the war, Britain had to mobilise as many people as possible. And at home and across the empire, people largely signed up for the same reasons. In the West Indies, for example, many were intensely patriotic and saw it as their duty to fight for king and country. Others saw the war as an opportunity to escape from poverty at home and see the world in the process.
And of course another reason why some of these men join up, they think that if they come and serve and fight for Britain, Britain will reward them. They will see these guys as having a stake in the empire, but actually deserving some more political representation and some more social rights as well.
We were told that we must leave all our belongings and go to the war, one West Indian veteran wrote. And if we lived to return, we would be given a plot of land for ourselves, a cow and money, and the government would treat us good and give us even work in its department so that we can live happily until our services are required again. However, although many colonial subjects signed up willingly, the British government was less than enthusiastic about recruiting so many black soldiers.
They don't really want to do it. The idea is if these men are signed up in large numbers of soldiers and they get to fight alongside whites and against whites, then this undermines the whole colonial hierarchy, the whole colonial system which is based on white supremacy. And obviously when these soldiers would come home, the great fear was that they would demand equality and perhaps even independence, and they would know how to fight for it as well.
Those fears, though, were not enough to stop the British from recruiting black troops. As the war grew in scope, more and more men were needed, and so instead of refusing their help, the British placed restrictions on what black soldiers from different places could and could not do. For starters, non-European subjects of the Empire were effectively barred from holding ranks above sergeant. Some did manage to flap those rules, especially later, but those cases were rare. Black colonial units were barred from fighting on the Western Front. For the men of the British West Indies Regiment, that came as quite a shock.
These men signed up under the same paying conditions as British volunteers, and they all expected to go and fight as infantrymen. But the majority of these battalions went to the Western Front, where they were not allowed to fight, so they were used as labour battalions. They did have rifles issued to them, they were normally old, really out-of-date rifles. They never got a chance to use these in action.
Similarly, while white South Africans fought in their thousands, black South Africans didn't even get the chance to sign up as soldiers. Instead, they were confined to labour battalions, in particular the South African Native Labour Corps, and were completely segregated from other Allied soldiers and even from French civilians. Lieutenant Colonel Godley, second in command of the unit, likened their housing to that of German prisoners of war. The camps occupied by our men are identical in every respect, except that as regards to locality, those occupied by prisoners are in the majority of cases more favourably situated.
These men again did some vital labouring jobs. They were unloading ships in harbours, building railways, building roads, felling trees. It's always logistics. Logistics is key. If you can't keep the railways, the roads, etc. running, you can't unload the ships, you can't have the army fighting.
This is one of the reasons that black stories are so often forgotten in the First World War. We tend to remember the fighting soldier rather than the people behind the lines, and that's the role that black soldiers were forced to take on the Western Front.
Many of these people died. Many of them were killed by shells, by bombs, but they also died of disease. They died of harsh conditions. Without the contribution of those people, those campaigns could not have been fought. We need to look wider than man with the
interviewing people, trying to get to the bottom of this.
It's the Americans.
What was the conclusion that they come up with? This is what they said. This is what they said here, okay? The consensus of opinion of the witnesses is that the colored enlisted personnel are neither temperamentally or intellectually capable of handling high explosives. The judge advocate also concluded it is an admitted fact supported by the testimony of the witnesses that there was a rough and careless handling of the explosives being loaded aboard ships at Port Chicago. There you go. Ain't that the mind of somebody who's possessed by the shaitan? After all the complaints of the back-breaking work, no training, these white managers forcing them to work harder work. Port ships at Port Chicago. There you go. Ain't that the mind of somebody who's possessed by the shaitan? After all the complaints of the back-breaking work, no training, these white managers forcing them to work harder, work faster, the abuse, they conclude that this happened because these black men were just dumb and working carelessly and not doing things right. Failure to take accountability and responsibility as usual. So these men, they're not even alive to defend themselves anymore. And that's the story of these young black men who were at Port Chicago in California who lost their lives. That's their story. 202 young black men. In this explosion that shouldn't have happened, it didn't have to happen. They were put in a failure, a situation to fail, and this is what happened. Now, let's get into the black men in the Navy who survived. Most of them died, but there were many who survived as well. Let's talk about them a little bit. So the men who survived, the black sailors who survived, they were eventually transferred to the Naval Barracks in Vallejo, California, which is near Mare Island. Okay? This is a shipyard and an ammunition depot. Okay? So the men who survived it, the black men, they transferred them there because, of course, this place is blown up. It's a wrap. Now, you got to keep in mind that these surviving black sailors were still in shock and mourning the deaths of their friends. One day they got friends, the next day they don't. Some of them see their friend's head floating in the water. So when they went to this new place, it was reported that these surviving men, when they transferred them there, they would become startled and they would jump and they would just react real weird when they heard a slam door or a drop box, somebody drop something or slam a door or a loud noise. They would kind of slightly freak out, because these men, they're survivors. They went through that and they were forced to go right back to work. No word, no explanation on what happened. This happened, that happened. No, just go to work. You were just at Port Chicago. That's gone. That blew up. All of your comrades lost their lives there. Keep on going. So you got to remember, these men already resented their day-to-day treatment working here. Slave chain gang type work. Laborers. Now they worry, but everything that they do, every bomb that they move, every door that slams, everything that drops, they think is going to be another explosion. And here's another kicker. This is real facts. The Navy gave the white officers who were around during this explosion, survivors, 30 days off to visit their families and get their minds together. Give them 30 days, survivors leave. Go see your family, go home before you return to regular duty. But they denied the black sailors the same visit. The same benefit to visit their family. So basically, it was for the black men, no, right back to work. You don't need, you don't have a brain anyway. You don't need to go visit your family. You don't need no time off. Get right back to work. So some of these black sailors, they got fed up with this treatment. The surviving black sailors, they got fed up. They started talking about boycotting and refusing to load any ammunition. Like, we're not doing this no more. So one day in early August, this is the same year, people, because they went right back to work immediately. Now it was August. So one day, the white military officers, they tried to go get these black sailors who were survivors to march to the Mar Allen Island ammunition depot. Okay? So they basically get them like, hey, come on, let's go. March here, we're gonna do this work. They were transferred to this place, and it's like, okay, so today, let's go get up. I guess they had the march where they went, let's go here and let's get this ammunition going. And what happened this day was the majority of these black men, they said, no, we're not going. Enough. We're done with this. We're not doing this work anymore. We're done. We're not doing it. They stuck together on this. So the Navy responded by telling these black men that they would face severe penalties if they did not return to work. These black men, they stood firm. They still said, no, we're not doing it. So by the end of the afternoon that day, more than 250 black sailors, were in prison. They took them to prison. They took them to a barge where they were guarded by Marines at gunpoint and held for 3 days. So they didn't actually take them to a jail. They took them to a place where they could just hold them in there. All 250 of them, actually more than 250, held them there under armed guard of the Marines. Left them there for 3 days. While they're there, the men, they banded together. They had some leaders who took charge of the group, okay? One of these leaders was a black seaman by the name of Joseph Small, and he urged all of these men, these young black men, to stick together. Joseph Small was looked at as a leader of the group because he was an elder at 22 years old. So they looked at him like he was a leader because he was 22. And the soldiers who were there, and I guess because of his personality as well, or the type of person he was, and he was also a pretty big muscular man at 22 years old. So, that command presence sometimes puts you in a leader role, and also that you're older, or you're on a higher age of most of them, okay? So what these black soldiers discussed is they believed that as long as they worked and they stuck together and they didn't refuse to do work,
to that of German prisoners of war. The camps occupied by our men are identical in every respect, except that as regards to locality, those occupied by prisoners are in the majority of cases more favourably situated.
These men again did some vital labouring jobs. They were unloading ships in harbours, building railways, building roads, felling trees. It's always logistics. Logistics is key. If you can't keep the railways, the roads, etc. running, you can't unload the ships, you can't have the army fighting.
This is one of the reasons that black stories are so often forgotten in the First World War. We tend to remember the fighting soldier rather than the people behind the lines, and that's the role that black soldiers were forced to take on the Western Front.
Many of these people died. Many of them were killed by shells, by bombs, but they also died of disease. They died of harsh conditions. Without a contribution of those people, those campaigns could not have been fought. We need to look wider than the man with the gun. We need to cover all those people that contributed to that victory.
The exception to this rule was the Indian Army, which held a special place in the colonial racial hierarchy. Indian troops helped save the Allies from defeat on the Western Front in 1914, before being gradually moved to the Middle East. In contrast, the French were happy to use their colonial troops on the Western Front when the situation demanded it. After heavy losses in 1914 and 15, West and North African troops played a key part in defending Paris. But the British, despite manpower shortages after the disastrous offensive on the Somme, always put racial considerations first. Even future Prime Minister Winston Churchill couldn't convince the authorities to let black soldiers fight on the Western Front. This was supposed to be a white man's war. In Africa, though, it was a completely different story.
Germans have a network of colonies from which they can use their navy to attack British sea lines of communication. We need to knock these out quickly. We can't send regular army soldiers because they're needed in France. So we need locally raised troops supported by hundreds and hundreds of thousands of African men, women and sometimes children in the support role, carrying the supplies, carrying the ammunition. That's why the African soldier actually got to fight those campaigns. It was out of necessity, but also the fact that they were fighting primarily other Africans.
It was a similar story for the British West Indies Regiment. A small contingent joined British forces in East Africa, and 2 battalions joined the fight against the Turks in the Middle East. Once again, they were only able to fight there because the enemy they were fighting was seen as a non-white, non-European enemy.
This is where the British West Indies Regiment gets a chance to actually do what the men signed up to do, which was to fight in the front line as infantry, alongside Australians and New Zealanders in 1918, and take a number of Turkish positions in a very successful attack. Unfortunately, for the majority of that British West Indies Regiment, they never got that opportunity. When these men were fighting, they were generally fighting in areas which we haven't looked at. The British focus has always really been Western Front. So that's why these stories have traditionally been neglected and quite often totally forgotten.
Alongside these colonial forces were black Britons who managed to join British Army units. The recruiting rules for these men were somewhat murky and relied on decisions made by individual recruiting officers. Arthur Roberts was one of those men. He was a shipyard worker in Glasgow before joining the King's Own Scottish Borderers, where he served as a private during the Battle of Passchendaele. His diary is part of the IWM collection, which includes these battlefield watercolours. This is an extract from his diary for September. The trench was only about 4 feet deep, so we very nearly had to crawl about. Jerry didn't half plaster us here. Good heavens, he nearly had us daft. There was practically no trench in the pillbox seen in the pictures, so every day there was a victim. Along with those black Britons, some citizens of the Empire came to Britain to try and join British units, rather than waiting for local regiments to be formed.
One of the men who did this was William Robinson Clark, or Robbie Clark. He was from Jamaica, and before the war he was a chauffeur, a mechanic. What Clark did was he went directly to Farnborough, the home of the Royal Flying Corps, and asked to join the RFC. The RFC obviously is a very technical branch of the military, and these men were in short supply. There was not that many people who could drive a motor vehicle in 1914, so when Clark turns up, first and foremost, this man is a mechanic and a driver. They're not looking at the colour of his skin, they're thinking, this is the sort of man we want in this role, and they sign him up.
Clark ended up as a mechanic in France before being put forward for pilot training in 1916. When he returned in 1917, he joined No. 4 Squadron, flying RE-8s, 2-seater reconnaissance aircraft. After being attacked by 5 German aircraft, he was shot down and had to crash land. He was badly wounded, with bullets in his leg and one just missing his spine. He did survive, but he was unable to fly again, and served as a sergeant mechanic for the rest of the war, before returning to Jamaica in 1919.
He's, we think at the moment, the only black pilot to serve with the British during the First World War. In 2020, we managed to secure his identity bracelet, and this is a very important object because, again, just as stories have generally been forgotten, the collecting of material by museums was also not really done. We are actively trying to actually collect this material now because we want to tell those wider, more diverse stories.
When the end of the war arrived in 1918, many colonial troops were expecting to finally receive some reward for their service. But for the British West Indies Regiment, that did not come to pass. First, they were denied a pay rise given to the rest of the British Army on the basis that they were so-called native troops. Then in December, they were concentrated into the port of Taranto in Italy for demobilisation, but were badly mistreated. A Guyanese soldier named Gershon Brown said, "Since we came here, we couldn't understand why these British soldiers, they didn't seem to want any attachment with us. We'd always seemed to get on good together in Egypt."
When they arrive, they find that many of the recreational facilities in the camp are off limits to them. It's for whites only. They are then given the job of digging latrines for Italian labourers. Now you can imagine that many who are signed up as British soldiers find that an absolute disgrace. And there's a riot in Taranto. And the British West Indies Regiment men is suppressed by armed soldiers. They're disarmed, and then they're very, very quickly shipped back to the Caribbean and demobilised as quickly as possible.
Men of the British West Indies Regiment got their pay rise, but they were now seen as a threat to British colonial rule. Armed guards would greet them on their return to the Caribbean. Meanwhile, in Africa, many soldiers found it difficult to fit in back home. They had been out, seen more of the world, and had come home with new ideas, which were not always welcome in existing village hierarchies. On top of that, many of those pre-war promises were not kept. Pensions were lower than that of white British soldiers, medical provisions were negligible, and that all-important land granted to returning soldiers in the Caribbean was often of poor quality or so remote that it was impossible to bring goods to market.
Their wartime service was seen as something inconvenient to remember by the political authorities, because if you reward these men for their service too much, the argument was they would start to want political and social reform. So very quickly the idea is recruit these men, use them for the campaign, and then unfortunately very, very quickly forget what they've done and make them go back to their villages, almost as though
So when they're at this place,
Are all present, as well as men from the British Empire.
That's guarded by the Marines. They're still working and doing things and doing jobs, but they're not loading any ammunition, you know. So when the Navy found out about this, they said that this was mutiny. They saw what these black men were doing as mutiny. So mutiny is basically rebellion against the authorities, people. That's what mutiny is. Or it's rebellion against these officers. Saying that, okay, mutiny means that you're not going to do your job, you're being rebellious, we're going to hit you with this charge. So this got back to some more people in the Navy. They said, you know what, we're going to take this up another level. They had another plan. One day, they were all of these black men, they were told to march to a baseball field under the armed guard of the Marines. It must have been a baseball field nearby. They get all of these men who refused to work. They said, okay, we're going to march you here. We got the Marines here. They got you under armed guard. Go to this field. So at this field, what they were supposed to do was they're going to meet a white man named Admiral Carlton Wright. He was a commander of the 12th Naval District that was headquartered at Mar Island. So they take the black men there, the black soldiers there, the black naval men there, and they're going to meet this Admiral Carlton Wright, who's some big shot, okay? So he pulls up in the Jeep. As soon as he got out this Jeep, he just went on to berate these black sailors, yelling at them, screaming at them, telling them what they needed to do, you know? And he said, it was what they quoted, he said, I want to remind you that mutinous conduct in a time of war carries a death sentence. He also said, the hazards of facing a firing squad are far greater than the hazards of handling ammunition. So this is what he said to try to get them to work. Like, look, you need to get out here and work and handle this ammunition because you're going to meet this firing squad if you don't. So this was their way of, handling a situation where they should have been talking and discussing things or using logic or coming up with ways to do things, better. Instead, it was basically, okay, we just going to kill you. White American logic. So when the Admiral left after he came in to speak to these black men, the officers who were also working there, they ordered the men to go on one side if they would follow orders and load ammunition, go on the other side if they refuse to load ammunition. So y'all know we not all built the same. You know something was going to happen here. The man, the big admiral just came and said, listen, we're going to hit you with this firing squad. So now the officers come and say, hey, listen, y'all heard him. Go on one side if you're going to load this ammunition and do this job, or go on the other if you don't, if you're not going to. So more than 200 of these men decided that they're going to return back to work. And the admiral recommended that they be charged with summary courts-martialing for refusing to obey orders. Okay? So 200 of them, boom. They said, okay, we're going to load, we don't want to meet this firing squad. We're going to go back to work. And they got hit with their charge as well for refusing to obey orders the first time. 50 of these black men stood firm, 10 toes down, firm in their beliefs. They said, no, we're not working, we're not going back to that. 50 of them. So the 50 of these men who refused to load ammunition were charged with conspiring to make a mutiny. Okay? All 50 of these men were transferred to a place called Camp Shoemaker, which is 30 miles south, and they were interrogated. So they took all 50 men, took them to Camp Shoemaker to interrogate them. Their charges faced lengthy prison sentences, and even possibly death. Okay? So they hold these 50 men at this camp, they give them their charges, what they may be facing. Few months go by, and now it's time for these men to go to trial. So the trial began on September 14th that same year, and they had this, and it was before a 7-member court of senior naval officers appointed by this guy, Admiral Wright. Okay, 7-member court. These 50 men are going to face these charges. Now, the white community, these white people in the military, they served as both the judge and the jury. Now, the prosecution was led by a lieutenant commander by the name of James R. Coakley. The defense, or the person who's going to protect these black naval men, was led by Lieutenant Gerald Veltman. He was a 33-year-old man, white man from Houston. Okay? In addition, the Judge Advocate's Office assigned 5 lawyers to represent groups of 10 of these men. It was 50 of them. They broke them down into 5 groups of 10, and they assigned a lawyer to each group of 10 as well, but they were headed up by Lieutenant Gerald Veltman. Of course, all of the officers trying and deciding the case, deciding the fate of these men, these black men, everybody's white in the room but them. Okay? So, the court-martial of these Port Chicago black seamen was the first U.S. mutiny trial of World War II and the largest mass trial in naval history, okay? This is the first time this ever happened to some black men, right? So this is what happened during the trial. The prosecution, they're talking about putting these 50 black men to death or in prison for a long time. The prosecution argued that the soldiers' fear was no excuse for their insubordination, and that the meetings Joseph Small organized that you remember Joseph Small, the man who I said, the young man who I said was the leader of the group, okay, because he's 22 years old. They said because he had these meetings, that constituted a conspiracy to mutiny. So basically they're saying since Joseph Small is organizing you guys, he's talking to you, telling you to stick together and not do this, that's a conspiracy to mutiny. Okay? Now the defense, or the people who are protecting these black naval men, they said that the officers asked the sellers if they were willing to work, willing to load ammunition after this explosion. They didn't order them to do so. They said that the men refused to move the explosives because they were fearful. Okay? And they also said that they did not conspire to mutiny. They said that you told us to load these things, but we didn't. You asked us if we were willing to load. We said no, because because of the explosion. You didn't order us to load. You asked us if we will still load. We said no only because we were fearful. We didn't know what was going to happen because of what happened, of course, at Port Chicago. And the person who headed up their defense, named Veltman, he said that those men are no more guilty of mutiny than they were of flying to the moon. This is their defense. This is what he's saying about the black men that he's defending. He says they're not guilty of mutiny. This is ridiculous. Okay? So the families of these 50 men, they contacted the NAACP and Thurgood Marshall, who was the director of counsel for the NAACP legal defense at the time, and he flew to San Francisco to attend the trial of these men and to contribute to their defense. Okay? Thurgood Marshall said, this is not an individual case. This is not 50 men on trial for mutiny. This is the Navy on trial for its whole vicious policy towards Negroes. So Thurgood Marshall's point is, this is only about them being black. Thurgood Marshall also demanded a formal government investigation of Port Chicago, including why the seamen were assigned to segregated labor units and why they were given no safety training before being required to move these dangerous explosives. Thurgood Marshall wants to know this. Investigate this, he said. He also said, I want to know why the Navy disregarded official warnings by the San Francisco waterfront unions before the Port Chicago disaster.
I'm gonna stop right here because it's going on long, but I just want to salute the black soldiers from America.
With U.S. Bank Business Essentials, you can accept payments wherever you do business, in store, online, or on
British
the go.
Indies.
No big hardware or software fees. And with a U.S. Bank checking account, you can increase your cash flow and cover your expenses faster by receiving deposits within hours, 7 days a week.
I want to send a shout out to them, and this is to you, and these are the relatives of these men, whether in
We provide better business payment solutions.
whether in Britain,
On the future. Visit usbank.com/business
whether in
to
Britain
learn more.
or they in America, your story need to be told, because you know how directors, white men, are not going to really tell the whole truth. They tell a portion of black truth. But you see what they were, it was all about. All about being a man. And so it makes me want to cover about the point about that guy going to the Ukraine. Now you see what it is. Why I made that previous video, why black men why would you want to go fight in Ukraine? And it's still like that. Even though someone in the U.S. military gonna have someone 62 years old, but why? Given the history, you die first, but are they gonna reward your family with benefits? This is something that people don't think about, and for the ones still in the military, they gotta do what they gotta do, because we live in some times and get what you can get out of, the military and get out. If you're a black man or a black woman, because it's obvious that during the history of this, even in war, they still got time to be racist. Even in the midst of a war, they got time to be racist. They had a debate, should they give black men guns, whether it was in America or whether it was over in England. Wow. You see how it is? That's direct racism. The subconscious racism is indirect racism. That was indirect racism, but they put it in wise. But shout out to the military, all those black veterans. Shout out to all military veterans. But this is particularly for the black veterans on both sides of the continent, whether the North American continent and the black Britons and Britain and the ones that descend us from Jamaica. Salute to you, because in the eyes of the world, they will never tell your story at the magnitude like they will. But subconsciously, if they do, they'll weasel it in there some kind. But to be visible, they still want to put you invisible until they get a profit of you to make you visible. They treat you still as invisible as black people. That's why I made this video, because you're visible to black people among our black people who choose to see us as visible. But to the racist, subconscious, and indirect racist people that still carry that generational curse of racism, we're still invisible. But they choose not to. And there's many more stories. Like, I didn't get a chance, but I had to do a conclusion of the black women and this other guy. Their stories need to be told. There's many we don't know about. That's why their story need to be told. We did greater things than what you can even imagine. Imagine going to fight for a country that simply judges you on said that because your intelligence, because they feel like your brain scientifically can't match up to a white person's brain based on skin complexion. In that spirit is still in resonate in America today. It's still like that. I wouldn't doubt if it's still in some forms in the military, as well as in civilian world. But I want to send a shout out to. I hope this video was kind of long, but it was. I just want to give a shout out to the Black Britons too, because their story's not being told. The descendants of Black British soldiers need to tell their story. You guys need to, you Black Britons, if you any Black British, they need to tell their story from Jamaica and in England. Shout out to you, because it's the same old thing, man. Whether they invisible you out over there, they invisibles out over here until they use something, tell you physically, mechanically, sports and music, they make you visible. Otherwise, when you're common British black man or American black man, you're just invisible. Black women too. Now, I just want to say shout out to you. If it just get over to England, shout out to the Black British for what you've done for your people. So I hope you like this video. Share it with somebody. And yeah, I'm dedicating this to all Black American and British who they never want this story to be out. And shout out to Runaway Slave and his uncle for his service, grand uncle for his service, uncle. I want to shout out to that and to all the Black veterans who are going to be looking at this video. Shout out to you, because no matter what they do, in some wean of fashion, they still wean their tactics of racism in there. I know, because your story's already been told. To be visible, to all, is really they want you to remain invisible till you die. That's on Britain and America and elsewhere who have the thing against the skin. The thing against the skin. But the Most High will bless you. What you will get here on earth, you'll get in heaven. So stay encouraged, whether you're black in Britain or black in America or any other part of the world. Stay encouraged, because you're visible when it intellectually try to invisible you out. Alright then, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this video. Share it with somebody. Till next time, take care. And this will be a continuance of another video put together. Alright, then take it easy, be blessed, and have a good day. Bye for now.